I want you to think back on times when your life changed in a hopeful, positive, maybe surprising way. What sparked that positive change? Was it something external, like a crisis or even an opportunity? Or did it begin inside you, like a quiet whisper that said, it's time? In my experience, it's both. It's an external and an internal thing. Maybe one or the other is stronger, but it's often both. Life shakes you awake and something inside finally decides to move. When I look back on the biggest turning points in my life, they aren't usually glamorous. Some grew out of heartbreak, some grew out of loneliness, some grew out of the realization that if I didn't change, nothing would. But one thing has been true throughout. Real transformation began with a tiny step, followed by a commitment to keep going, even when I didn't want to. That's when real significant change happened over time. And the Good Life projects that I've been talking about, which is part of my Good Life positioning system and the compass framework that I've been talking about over the last 21 days, these projects have really been instrumental in helping me stay focused on what's most important, to help me start with small steps, but then also to follow through long term to see significant real life change happen. It's really been around these projects. So you could say my entire life was transformed at different phases of my life when I committed to these projects. And it was sometimes an imperfect, awkward, and even desperate attempt, but ultimately I was wholehearted about it. And so if you've been following along these last 21 days, you've been working on your own Good Luck project. If you haven't, maybe this will be additional motivation to start something. Today, I'm just going to walk through these projects that I've done for myself and talk through how they changed me as maybe evidence to help you decide to commit to something long-term for yourself. Welcome back to the Good Life Lab. I'm Dr. Dave, and this is day 21 of our series of moving from languishing and lost to a good gay life. And so the last 21 days, I've been walking you through this process of developing a Good Life project. So a project that you can, that's based on your strengths and passions and interests that you can develop and commit to for a year. And so today I'm going to walk you through the projects that I've done and give you an example of how they've changed me and molded my life. Today, day 21, isn't about adding another step to this process, but to really help you see maybe your potential journey of a Good Life project reflected in mine. Over the past couple of decades, my life has been impacted and changed by these major projects I've done. Each one of those projects is a living experiment. As I look back on these projects, most of them, if not all of them, arose out of a desire to deal with something difficult in my life. And the year-long framework that I committed to for myself and also asking you to commit to for yourself, that commitment to change helped me face the difficult thing with grit and determination to just keep going against all odds. I've come across this new two-part series, movie series called Sisu. And when I first saw the movie, I think it was on Prime or something, just kind of watched it randomly out of the blue. It's a revenge movie, so it may not be for everybody listening. I really like those kinds of movies. I came across this movie, and it's just this man fighting against all odds to stay alive and tortured and, left for dead and, many times. And he's able to kind of come back and continue fighting. And so there's a sequel to that now. Again, another revenge movie. I think it's called Sisu, Road to Revenge or something. Again, another example of him fighting against all odds to stay alive physically. So the word Sisu I thought was the name of the main character, but it's a Finnish word. And I looked it up what it means. And it says, the definition is basically that it represents a concept of extraordinary determination, resilience, and courage in the face of adversity. It is not a single word concept in English, but is best understood as a combination of grit, tenacity, and stoic perseverance. So just this all out against all odds, grit, perseverance, commitment to stay alive, to survive, to thrive. And that's what I think it takes in the midst of the difficult things in our lives. For me, that's been the case. There have been times when I just have told myself I need to survive one day at a time. And that went on for months and years sometimes, just to stay alive. And that's all I could do, and just to survive. And these projects have helped me bring focus to some difficult situations and some hope in the midst of those situations to keep going. So like I said, I'm going to walk you through a number of these projects. My major Good Life projects that I've talked about throughout this series and that I've done throughout my life have included titles of projects that turned into books called A Shadowed Life. That was when I was turning 40. The second project I did was called 12 Months to Live initially. And that evolved into what I'm calling now The Year I Lived. The third major project I did was Project 46, when I was turning 46. And then Gratitude Visit, which is a year about writing letters of gratitude, which I've talked about, and I'll get into some more here. And then the next project, which is kind of a culmination of a lot of conversations I've had, I'm calling Naked Dudes Night. So it's based on a few years of conversations around a hot tub, and we get naked and just have conversations, real vulnerable conversations about what it means to be a man. And most of them were straight guys. That's a book I'm working on, a project I've had kind of throughout my life, just being honest with people with especially men, with what's going on with us. And then a project around turning 60. So I'm calling it Project 60. I just turned 60 this year. The next phase of my life will be focused on 3 themes: love, so building greater community still in my life; wonder, so trying to continue to focus on and be aware of the transcendence in my life; and then creating worlds is the third theme for this next phase of my life, which has to do with the YouTube channel and creating content on the channel, but also in other ways to help people, especially queer men. So that's an overview of the projects I've done. I'm going to go into detail about each one a little bit, but essentially what I've learned from them, just doing projects in general, I want to talk about that first. The things that I've gotten out of doing these year-long projects for myself. So the core themes have been like moving from hiding as a gay man to being more comfortable with myself. That's been a major theme through a few of these projects. And another one is turning the pain and frustration, anxiety, and things I was dealing with into more of a purposeful, meaningful existence. And that's been a common theme. Another consistent theme, things that I've gotten out of these projects, is deconstructing a core part of who I was, my faith. I know a lot of people are going through leaving or reconsidering their Christian faith or their conservative faith and moving into whatever's next for them. But that's been a big part of my life in these projects, as well as having time to think about and reflect on my spiritual life and deconstructing some core beliefs and then finding a way to reconstruct something meaningful for myself. Another major thread through all these projects has been finding purpose and meaning. That's something I've struggled with from when I was just a little kid. Being gay, that caused me to really reflect more seriously on what's important in life. These projects have helped me take a look at that more intentionally, but also craft ways that I could find more meaning for myself and then ultimately for other people as well. Another major concept or theme that's been a part of these projects for me is transforming my self-doubt and shame about who I was. So really internalized homophobia into something else, something more positive, something constructive. These projects have helped me do that, take me through that process for myself. Another common theme of these projects, of what it's helped me with, is really shifting from a survival, dark and depressing kind of mindset to thriving, to finding meaning and purpose and fulfillment in life. So I can say now, approaching 61, in January, I feel in many ways more alive than I have throughout my life. I feel more integrated with who I am as a gay man, and feel I have a spiritual life as well. I have core friends and family and meaningful work. And that work is just doing this, finding ways to be creative and help other people with my skills and strengths and experiences. So that's a summary of what these projects have done for me throughout my life. I'm going to get into each of these projects in a little more detail. So I'll just go ahead and start with the first project that I can remember, first significant project I can remember, and walk you through the last maybe 20 years, I guess, and several different projects I've done and how they've changed me, what my hope was and why I did them, and then also how they transformed me in some way. So the first project I can remember doing beyond I think I saw my bachelor's and master's programs and my PhD as these projects. And once those ended in my early 30s, the next big thing that I set my sights on was to bike across the country. I originally thought of this idea because I wanted to, at the time I was a Christian, and I wanted to stop at different places and essentially preach the gospel. That was my original intent. I was still working in a Christian environment at college. And so this desire, I shared it with a few other friends, some soccer buddies and coworkers, and I got enough interest from them. So there are 4 core people that are part of this project. And I think underlying it, for me, I wasn't out at the time, but I really wanted to feel more connected to guys and to have this brotherhood. And that was kind of a big part of it for me, was to have this experience, but also have this closer bond with guys. My boss at the time, I was a vice president at the college, and the president was a good friend of mine. He and another worker at the college we decided to take a summer off and do a fundraising sabbatical trip. And we did essentially stop at different places along the way. I don't know if we preached the gospel, but we were on radio stations, Christian radio stations across the country, talking about what we're doing. But that was the first major project. And I'd say even that was now 20 some years ago. And I'm still in touch, even though I've changed quite a bit myself. I came out during that time after that, and I've taken a different path than my Christian friends that I went on the trip with. But I still Zoom with them from all over the country and still stay connected. So that part of it really did help solidify that bond, and our friendship continues to this day. And so that was the first major project. I did it it was just a dream of mine that I wanted to do. I was the initiator and also the planner of it, but the experience is one that I will obviously never forget, and a highlight of my life. And also I reap the benefits still of it, of being close to these guys that I went on the trip with. Lots of great memories. It took us about 3 months and 2,700 miles, went from San Francisco to the Jersey coast. And that was kind of the experience we had. The biking trip was kind of, even in and of itself, was like an experiment and a project that involved other people. The first official year-long project I did was when I was turning 40, and I had decided to commit myself to writing a book. I'd always wanted to write a book, and a part of that, I was going to not cut my hair, let my hair grow for the year. Like maybe I was like, I've said before, like thinking of me as like Samson, where I would get this extra energy and time maybe to just focus on my book. It's symbolic, really. And also no media. I wasn't going to watch TV. Beginnings of, I think, internet and stuff, that wasn't as much of an issue back then, but no TV for that year, just to make sure I'm focused on writing. And I think underlying it all was this covenant with God at the time, I was still a Christian, to try to still not be gay. I tried for 20 years, prayed, fasted, counseled with, sought counseling and therapy, and did all these things to try to not be gay, because I didn't think that was what God wanted. So this was my last ditch effort to not be gay. And so I leaned into prayer and fasting and focusing on, and Bible reading, whatever I could to reinforce this idea that I try to change, basically. And so at the end of the year, I did have a finished book that I worked on, just talking about my life journey up to that point. I did have long hair and even braids in my hair, but I was still gay. And so that actually helped me decide from that point on that, I've done everything I could for 20 years to deny this part of myself or to try to heal it, and nothing had worked. And so I'm like, I can't do this any longer. So it helped me decide that even though I was going in the direction of not being gay, that this was my last ditch effort to reinforce the fact that I'm just not changing, and this is who I am. And so that was the major, I think, learning from that year of committing to writing a book and just reflecting on these things in my life. So the next major project I did was 12 Months to Live. I've called it 12 Months to Live, and I refined that a little bit. Now I'm calling it The Year I Lived. But essentially it was 12 months of pursuing passions. I started off with a life list, like I've encouraged you to do. And then I narrowed that life list to 12 things and began to organize my year based on that. I thought the framing for me was, what if I had 12 months to live? What would I want to do with my last 12 months? And a lot of that was pursuing my passions and interests that I had. That was after my Project 40, trying not to be gay. A couple years later, I left the Christian college environment, and went on this journey to figure out what was the kind of next thing in my life, but also to come out and just be happier about who I was. And so I designed this 12-month project, and each month for that year, I did something different related to kind of a career interest or some way that people, what they do to figure out their lives. Like I did a vision quest, Native American kind of concept of 3 days and 3 nights of fasting to call to the universe for purpose. So I did that for 3 days and 3 nights. And then I spent some time in a monastery in solitude. I went to Nepal and climbed the Mount Everest base camp and did a number of things just to help me lean into my passions, but also try to figure out the next steps of my life. I ended the 12 months project in a much better place. Actually, that was a significant turning point in embracing who I was as a gay man and trying to lean into. Halfway through that project, I was confronted by a friend. It's like, why don't you just accept who you are? And being from a Christian background, both of us, and it was the first time I really considered that. It's like, well, I know I haven't been happy denying that or not allowing myself to be gay in some ways. I was confronted by this from my friend. Just why don't you just accept this part of yourself? And like I said, for the first time, I considered that and was able to begin to lean into that halfway through this project. So that became a major theme of this 12 Months to Live project. And I met somebody during that time that my friend introduced me to, actually, who was going through something similar. So we developed a friendship initially and then a romantic connection at the end of my 12 months project. And so at the end of this 12 months, year-long project, to kind of come alive and to come out more, I met up with this new romantic interest and had this kind of glorious weekend at a lakeside house in Michigan. And it was something I'd always dreamed of, with somebody I was attracted to, that I also felt the same way towards me. So it was a perfect ending to this year-long project. And so I benefited in many ways from having this experience. And even though that was like a dream-like culmination of things for that year, not too long after that, because I was learning still how to date other guys in my mid 40s now for the first time, I just didn't know how to do that. And eventually, kind of a few months later, even though it was a great experience, I took a kind of a darker turn again in my life. So I benefited from the 12 months, but then that brought me to another space where I needed to learn and lean into. So a couple years later, because I was depressed and unemployed at the time and just spiritually confused, I developed another project, Project 46, which I talked about a lot. And that had three themes: love and life, peace with God, and a job I like. So the love and life meant I really wanted to find a partner in crime, but also a more fulfilling community. I had moved away from my Christian community and wanted to find a queer community, or just an accepting community. So that was my love and life piece. The peace with God I was really struggling spiritually to reintegrate or to deconstruct or just to find my way while also being gay. And so that year was about trying to find peace with that within myself. And the last intention was a job I liked. So I was unemployed, really trying to make it as a freelancer, just wasn't working out. I wanted to get back into higher education. But what I learned from that project, and I've done this long video explaining the before and after of this experience of the Project 46. So you can refer to that in the description below. But essentially, it took about a year before those intentions started to come true. And it got worse before it got better. I got more depressed. I got on medication and had to just lean into just surviving to get by. But eventually, I think it was a year or so, maybe a little bit longer, when I met my partner, and we've been together for 13 years. And that was a significant shift and change because of that project. And then the second aspect of peace with God, I felt more peace with myself. I think I had to actually set my faith aside for a while. I've shared my spiritual journey on this channel quite a bit, but part of that meant becoming an atheist. And then over the years, becoming more of an agnostic. And now I think I consider myself just a curious, queer man, spiritual, and wanting to be open to whatever's next for me. But that took a while. So it's taken, it's 10, 15 years to get to that point. But it's all started with the Project 46. And the third component of a job I liked in that Project 46, it took me 2 years. I found a part-time job as a therapist for a while, wasn't satisfying, but then 2 years of exploring, looking, applying for jobs. I got back into higher education, and that was a very fulfilling kind of culmination to my higher ed career. I became a full professor, director of behavioral sciences department at a large university, published. All those things came to be at that last stint of my higher ed career. So all that was the culmination of my Project 46. So I was in a very dark space for a long time, a few years, really a lot of my life, because I was denying my identity and then trying to integrate my identity for a few years, and that took a while. But all that, because of Project 46, this year-long project, I was able to shift away from kind of a negative, depressive mindset to a more positive, hopeful, grateful mindset that really took me in a direction where I am today, just feeling very good about my life. So that's the, I think, third or fourth project. So the next project after Project 46, I was back in higher education, but still experiencing depression in the winter months. So I talked about this more in my last video, where I had seasonal depression for most of my life. It was more clinical depression for a long time, and then turned into more just seasonal depression. And I did this gratitude visit project where I wrote letters of gratitude and delivered them to friends and family all over the country. And initially, it didn't seem to make much difference in my mood and my outlook. But as I committed to that year, I have definitely seen the long-term benefits of doing this long-term project and committing to it for a year. And I really think my brain chemistry has been altered because of that, because of my expressed gratitude consistently over that year. And I haven't had the same seasonal depression that I did before. So that's the biggest kind of learning or benefit from that project. I think what consumed me from that point on was my job, but then also my project really revolved around getting full professorship, and which involved starting my business, the Come Alive Collaborative for a while, which evolved into a counseling practice and coaching practice, and research that I was doing and writing that I was still doing during that time. So I didn't have any formal year-long projects for a while. And now I mentioned the Naked Dudes Night is kind of a project, and that's an ongoing, evolving one where I'm capturing conversations with men that I've had and highlighting them in this book that I'm going to write at some point. And then my current project, I mentioned briefly, Project 60 is all about mapping the next 10, 20 years of my life. What do I want to end my life with in a positive, good, productive, legacy kind of way and service to others? How can I frame this next 20 years? And what do I want to look back on at 80 and say that I accomplished and tried to do and experimented with? So that's my focus. Project 60 is really about, like I mentioned, love, leaning into community. It seems to be an ongoing need for me, and it's definitely worthy of investment because it's the most important thing we can do in life is to invest in relationships in terms of our own happiness, but also in benefiting others, is to kind of strengthen those connections. And then the second part of my Project 60 is wonder, is to be connected to something greater than myself, which for me is nature, and just being intentional every day of taking these all walks and absorbing and being present in my daily all walks and activity there. The other part of wonder for this Project 60 is to enjoy my travels and to experience them, to be more present in those travels, to plan intentionally the places I want to go, and then capture those experiences and share those with others as part of my channel, as part of these all walks that I'm doing. That's a part of the wonder. The last part of the Project 60 is creating worlds, which is very much about this YouTube channel, like I mentioned, and other resources and books and things that I've done throughout my life that I want to bring together as I age and come to the end of my life. I want that to be these projects I've started, the books mostly, and I have drafts of them, but I want to bring those various pieces of my life into completion in some way over the next 10, 20 years. And so that's my Project 60. It might extend for a couple of years now. It's going to extend for the next 20 years, but I think most of it's really taking shape now. So we've come to the end of me reviewing the major projects I've done, year-long projects that I've done to improve my life in different ways. And I could say that these projects didn't just change habits that I've had. I mean, they helped me move forward in my life by developing habits around gratitude and transcendence and connection with other people. But essentially it changed who I was in a core way. So habits were formed, but more importantly, over time, it's the significant transformation that happened at a core level of who I am, both in my outlook and mood and mindset, but also accepting myself as who I am as a gay man, as a spiritual being, maybe not the same I've been over the years, but definitely spiritually minded, and also in need of connection with other people. So these projects have changed me in small ways and around habits, but also in significant identity ways. And that's the point. A Good Life project isn't a productivity hack or just about changing your habits. It's a choosing, it's a direction, it's a devotion to becoming the person that you're meant to be. So now it's your turn. Choose your project, mark your commitment to that project, take your first step, whatever that is, and continue to follow the breadcrumbs. This is your threshold moment. I think you felt a call to adventure, maybe through these videos or something happening in your life. You're feeling called to something different. Now you're following the call, even in small ways, hopefully, and you have this threshold moment to continue to do that, to commit to that long term. So it's an opportunity for an identity shift, if you so choose. It's a new beginning from here on out, one day at a time, one breadcrumb clue at a time. All right, you've completed your compass, you've built your good life statement, you've set the trajectory for your life with the remarkable Memento Mori 10-year Good Life quest. You've refined your prototype, and now you're crossing the threshold into what's next. But if you want support, please look for the link below to join our Queer Men's Good Life group coaching waitlist. I'd love to see you virtually in these groups to support one another through this process. So it's been a pleasure the last 21 days taking you through the series, a very critical, instrumental part of my life. I've been honored to share it with you and hope it benefits you in moving from kind of languishing and maybe feeling a little lost to a good, gay, happy life. I'll see you in the next series. I'm not sure what that's going to be yet, but I will see you on the other side. All right, have a good rest of your day.